Welcome back. If you're new here, settle in. You picked a good night to find this place. I want to tell you something before we start. It's quiet where I'm sitting right now. The kind of quiet that makes small sounds matter. The furnace ticking on a car going past somewhere. You know that quality of silence where you start listening to it instead of through it? That's the mood tonight. Tonight's stories are about wrongness that's already inside the familiar. Not monsters in the dark, but routines that have been slightly altered. Rooms that shouldn't be occupied. Records that seem to know too much. Rides you've taken 1,000 times that take one wrong turn. If you're a regular here, thank you for coming back. If you're new, consider subscribing. Not for the algorithm, just because some of you will be here again next week. And I like knowing that. Get somewhere comfortable. Lights low if you can manage it. Let's begin. The night crew at Kamicho Station. I worked the overnight maintenance shift at a commuter rail station for 11 years. Not a large station, 3 platforms, 6 tracks, one of those intermediate stops between the main city and the outer suburbs where trains slow down without really meaning it. The kind of station that has a lost property cabinet with a handwritten log and a vending machine that nobody stocks correctly. I knew every corner of it. My shift ran from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. The circuit took about 90 minutes if nothing was broken. Platform edge sensors, ticket gate alignment, the lighting rigs over each platform, the lost property cabinet, the vending log. Same order every night for 11 years. I was not someone who varied his routine. The station had a waiting room on platform 3. Small, maybe 12 seats, frosted glass panels, fluorescent strips that buzzed if you left them on too long, a radiator that made a sound like someone dragging furniture across the floor above you. It existed so early commuters could stand out of the rain before the 6:14 a.m. I'd walked past it 6 nights a week for nearly a decade without giving it much thought. In spring of my 10th year, the waiting room was closed for renovation. Cracked glass panels, failed radiator, a compliance issue with the electrical panel. The station manager put a padlock on the door, filed the paperwork, and told me to check the padlock each night and log the result. The renovation was supposed to take 3 weeks. It ran to 7 because the contractor found an issue with the subfloor. I didn't mind. One less thing on the circuit. Check the lock, write it down, move on. I found the door open for the first time in early April. Not open wide. Just a few centimeters, pushed out from the frame, the door resting against the gap. The padlock was secure. That's the part that stopped me. I stood there for a full minute trying to work out how the door could be ajar with the padlock correctly threaded through the hasp. I pushed it closed. I removed the padlock, examined it, put it back. I logged it as a possible frame alignment issue and moved on. It happened again 10 days later. Same gap, padlock fine. I pulled the door closed, noted it in the log, and mentioned it to the facilities coordinator in my morning handover. He said he'd look at the frame. The 3rd time, I looked through the gap. I don't know why I hadn't done it before. Probably because the room was under renovation, and I wasn't supposed to be in there. And I'd been doing this job long enough not to look for problems that weren't on the checklist. But the 3rd time I looked, the room was dark. The fluorescent strips had been disconnected. The only light came through from the platform, dim, orange-tinted, the color of station lighting at 2 in the morning. And in the far corner, in the last seat by the bricked-up service hatch, there was a shape. My first thought was a coat. Someone had left a jacket draped over the back of the chair, and it had settled in a way that looked like a seated person. That was my first thought, and I held onto it for about 4 seconds. Then the shape adjusted in the seat. Just slightly. The way a person shifts when they have been sitting still too long. I stepped back from the door. I called the station security officer Yamada, a man I'd worked alongside for 6 years. The kind of person who moves fast and doesn't ask unnecessary questions. He was there in 4 minutes. We went in together. The room was empty. No coat, no person. The fluorescent strips were dark, disconnected at both ends, but the far corner chair, the last seat by the service hatch, had an indentation in the cushion that was still warm. I put my hand on it. Warm. Yamada called the supervisor on duty. They pulled the CCTV. The camera covered the exterior of the waiting room door. Not the interior seating, so they could see the door, but nothing inside. The footage showed the door as closed all evening. At 2:38 a.m., the door showed as slightly ajar. No one entering or exiting. Just open from the inside, then at 3:14 a.m., closed. The supervisor's working theory was a pressure issue. Temperature differential between the closed room and the platform, causing the doorframe to shift. He said it was common in older station buildings. I wrote that in the log. What I didn't write, because I didn't know yet, was that this had been happening for 14 months. When the station manager pulled the CCTV archive the following week, after I filed a second incident report, they found it. 26 separate nights over 14 months. The door to the closed waiting room shown as ajar on the exterior camera. Always between 2:30 and 3:15 a.m. Always on nights when the maintenance crew was present. Never on the 2 nights a week. The station ran on skeleton schedule with no ground crew. Always closed again before 3:20. 26 nights. I had walked past that door on each of those nights. The station manager had the door frame examined properly. A locksmith confirmed the padlock and hasp were functioning correctly. A carpenter reset the frame. A new padlock was installed. The supervisor signed off. 2 weeks passed without incident. Everyone settled into the rational explanation. My last full week before transferring to another station, I had requested the transfer for personal reasons, nothing to do with any of this. I was doing my circuit. Standard night, nothing unusual. 2:41 a.m. I reached the waiting room on platform 3. The door was closed. New padlock, new frame, correctly secured. I put my hand on it, confirmed the padlock, and started to walk on. I took 3 steps. The sound was low. The sound a chair cushion makes when a person shifts their weight, a slight compression, the muted complaint of the chair joints underneath, coming from the other side of the door. Clear enough that I stopped walking. I stood on the platform for a long time. I did not open the door. I called Yamada. While I waited for him, standing in the orange light at 2:33 a.m., I thought about the CCTV archive. 26 nights over 14 months. Nights the maintenance crew was present. Nights I was walking my circuit, checking my padlock, logging my times, filing my reports. Yamada came. We unlocked the room. Empty. But Yamada crouched down by the far corner chair and pointed at the base. I hadn't looked at it carefully before. All the other chairs in the room had 4 floor bolts. Standard configuration. This chair had 6. 2 additional bolts on the front left leg. A different grade of steel from the originals. Newer. Someone had added them at some point to anchor the chair more firmly to the floor. There was no record of any modifications to the waiting room seating. No work order. No note in the renovation file. I transferred the following week. My replacement is a man I briefly trained. Experienced, thorough. On his 3rd shift, he sent me a message. Quick question. The log shows you flagged the waiting room doors several times. Is there anything I should know? I thought about what to tell him. I wrote back, check the padlock every night, log it either way. And then, because I couldn't stop myself, I added, the door opens from the inside. He didn't reply to that. I don't blame him. The thing that bothers me most, not the shape in the chair, not the warmth, not the bolts, is the pattern. It came only on nights the maintenance crew was present. Never the skeleton schedule nights, only when someone was working the station. For 11 years, I logged my circuit times. Platform check, gate check, lighting rig, lost property cabinet, vending log, waiting room padlock, same order, same timing, year after year. My log would have told anyone or anything exactly when I'd be on platform 3. Exactly when I'd pass the door, exactly how long before I'd loop back. I had been filing that schedule in detail for over a year before I ever looked through the gap. The lane. I'm not someone who collects these stories. My neighbor Colin is a retired land surveyor, 62 years old, and the least dramatic person I know. When he came around that morning, a Tuesday in late October, his spaniel Biscuit still on the lead, he looked like a man who had been turning something over all night and gotten nowhere with it. He had been walking the dog on the lane behind the farm, about 4:30 in the afternoon, going dark early the way it does in autumn. The lane runs between two hedgerows for about a quarter mile before it bends, and at the bend there's a gate to an old field nobody uses anymore. He said he stopped because Biscuit froze. Dogs do that, usually a fox. He looked up the lane. There was a figure standing at the bend, just standing, facing away from him toward the field gate. He thought nothing of it at first. Walkers do use that lane, though not much past October. He called out in case Biscuit startled the person. No response. The figure didn't move at all. He waited a minute, maybe two, still nothing dark enough by then that he couldn't make out much detail. A wax jacket. Green Wellingtons. That was all he could see. He turned around and went home. He told his wife Janet over dinner. She asked what the person was wearing. He described it again. Wax jacket, green Wellingtons. She set her fork down. She said, "That's what Trevor wore. The old wax jacket, the green wellies." Trevor was Colin's older brother. Trevor died 11 years ago. Colin is not a superstitious man. He told me that part himself, in the tone of someone establishing credentials. He does not believe in those things. He was uncomfortable that the clothing detail had landed the way it had, and he wanted to be clear that he wasn't drawing conclusions. He just couldn't put it down. So he went back the next afternoon. He said he just wanted to put it to rest. He walked the lane, reached the bend, and looked at the ground by the gate. There were footprints in the mud. He stood looking at them for a while before he came around to tell me. He said the footprints were facing toward him, toward the farm, not toward the gate. Whatever he had seen from down the lane had appeared to be facing away, but the prints in the mud told a different story. Whatever was standing at that bend had been facing him the whole time. Colin is 62, a retired land surveyor, and I have known him for 30 years. He measures things for a living. He does not embellish. That is what I keep coming back to. The measurements don't work. The same bus. I take line 473 every morning, 6:40 departure, Jubbaquara Terminal, northeast toward the center. Been doing this commute 4 years. I work dispatch for a logistics company. I know routes. I know schedules. I know when something is off. First thing you need to know, I always sit in the 4th row. Window seat. Right side, always. Not superstition, just habit. 4th row is past the engine heat but before the rear axle bump. There's a green stripe on the upholstery of the seat back in front of me. I have stared at that stripe for about 800 mornings. Horizontal, green on gray. In March last year, I got on the bus, and the stripe was vertical. Same bus number on the front. Same driver or someone who looked like him. Same build. Same jacket. But vertical stripe. I looked around. All the stripes were vertical. I assumed they'd rotated in a substitute vehicle from the depot. That happens. I sat down, went to work, didn't think much about it. but then the route changed. Not drastically, the bus made an early left turn on a street where it never turns. I have done this route 4 years. We do not turn there. We went down that street for about 6 blocks, then swung back onto the main route at a stop I didn't recognize. 2 of the usual stops were skipped, the newsagent corner and the pedestrian overpass stop, and then we were back on schedule, running normally, as if nothing had happened. I checked the transit app on my phone. Line 473 showing normal. No diversions flagged. I went to work, said nothing. Assumed road works. It happened again in April. Same early turn, same skipped stops. And that morning, vertical stripe on the upholstery. I started keeping track. Dates in a notes app, photo of the seat fabric each morning. Over 3 months, 6 mornings with a deviation. 6 mornings with the vertical stripe. Every normal morning, horizontal stripe. The correlation was perfect. Not once did the pattern break. Deviation morning, vertical. Normal morning, horizontal. I reported it to the transit authority twice. They told me line 473 runs one designated vehicle, and there are no recorded diversions on the route. I asked about maintenance swaps when they substitute a different bus. They said any substitution would use the same interior upholstery specification. They had no explanation for the pattern difference. I decided to stay on one of the deviation mornings, past my stop. I wanted to see where the turn went. The bus made the left turn, same as before, 6 blocks down the side street. But this time I was watching carefully out the window. We passed a building I had not noticed in 4 years of passing through that district. Big, gray, concrete, flat roof, parking lot in front, no signage, 3 stories. Completely unremarkable, except that I had never seen it. I took a photo through the window. When I got off, I checked the coordinates on the Maps app. I had been watching the cross streets as we passed. At those coordinates, the map showed a vacant lot, listed as a development site. No building. The photo on my phone shows a building. Clear image. Gray concrete, parking lot, several cars models from the last few years. Nothing in the photo looks old. I showed it to a friend who grew up in that part of the city. He went quiet. Then he said, "That building, yes. They tore it down. I watched it with my father. I was maybe 12, 13. He paused. 97. My friend is 34. He watched it demolished in 1997. The concrete in my photograph shows no weathering. The cars in the lot are current models. I still take line 473. I need the job and it is the most direct route, but I do not sit in the 4th row anymore. I stand near the door where I can see the route tracker on my phone and look out the front window at the same time. I have not ridden a deviation morning since November. I do not know what that means, whether the schedule cycled away from me, or whether something changed, or whether it is still running and I just haven't been on the right bus. That last thought is the one I can't put down. The idea that it runs regardless, that other people board it without knowing what it is, that some of them might stay on past their stop in front of a building that does not exist on any map. Whether they get off there, whether they find their way back to the main route, I have no way to check. I just stand near the door now every morning and watch the turns. Echo count history. Okay, so I'm going to explain this as clearly as I can, because every time I tell someone they think I'm confused about how the technology works, or I'm misremembering the order of things. I'm a computer science student. I understand how push notifications work. That is actually what makes this harder to explain, not easier. I bank with one of the major apps here in Seoul. Push notification for every transaction. Immediate. You make a purchase, 2 seconds later the notification appears, standard setup. I had it configured to notify me instantly. In September, I started getting notifications for purchases I hadn't made yet. Not fraud, not charges for things I didn't buy. The actual purchases I would end up making at the right store for the right amount. The notification would come through. I would see it, think I haven't bought anything. And then later that same morning, I would be at that exact store, buying that exact item, spending that exact amount. It happened 3 times before I paid close attention. I told myself I was mixing up the timing. Memory does that. The 4th time, I showed my roommate the notification before I left the apartment. She read it. 11:14 a.m., convenience store on Mapodero. 4201, I had not left yet. I went out. I stopped at that store because I was thirsty. My own decision, no one directing me. I bought a drink, 4201. I came home with the receipt and held it next to my phone. She asked me what I wanted her to say. I called the bank. They said the transaction history showed only completed purchases, nothing irregular. I asked about push notification logs, whether a notification could be generated before a transaction confirmed. They said no. The notification is triggered by the transaction. There is no other source. I started screenshotting every notification immediately when it arrived. Over 6 weeks, 14 notifications that appeared before the corresponding purchase. I have the screenshots. Here is the part that stays with me. I went back to the first week's screenshots, the oldest ones, and the timestamps had changed. The notification times now showed as a few minutes after the purchase, not before, as if the records had been corrected. Cleaned up. The purchases were identical. Amounts, stores, everything. Only the time field had shifted. I still have the conversation with my roommate. She still remembers. We both know what we saw. I switched banks. I haven't had a preemptive notification since. I don't know if that means the problem was isolated to the first app, or if it means whatever was doing it already knows which app I'm using now and doesn't need to show me anymore. I don't know which of those is more manageable to believe. The Relief Driver. I work overnight dispatch for a regional transit authority in eastern Ohio. 14 years on the night shift, 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. I cover breakdowns, missed routes, and anything the day team didn't account for. It is not exciting work. It is radio checks and system logs and the kind of attention that looks like nothing from the outside. The only thing I bring to the job is that I do not miss things. December 2023. I am watching the route tracker, a GPS system that shows every active vehicle as a colored dot on a map with a route number, a vehicle ID, and a driver ID attached. I have stared at this screen for 14 years. I know what normal looks like. At 11:22 p.m. I see a dot I do not recognize. Route 14. Route 14 was a northeast residential loop serving the Millhaven district. We discontinued it in January 2021. Funding cut, buses reassigned, route retired from service. The route does not exist. There is no Route 14, but the dot is moving, making stops on the 2021 schedule, which I still have in the system archive because nobody deleted it, running the full loop on time, as if the route had never been discontinued. I radio to the yard, all active vehicles accounted for. Nothing on Route 14. I check the vehicle ID. The dot is throwing. Bus 44. Decommissioned, sold to a school district in Pennsylvania, February 2021. I check the driver ID, 0114. I flag the whole thing as a GPS anomaly and log it. I've seen phantom signals before. Old route data cached in the system, generating display errors. I note it and keep watching. At 12:07 a.m., the dispatch line rings. A man calling from a stop on Millhaven Road, old Route 14 territory. He says the bus didn't pick him up. He's been waiting 20 minutes. I tell him Route 14 hasn't run in 3 years. He says, then what was that bus that just went past? I ask him to describe it. Transit bus. Correct colors, the number 14 on the front. I ask about the driver. He pauses. He says the driver was older, in uniform, looking straight ahead. He didn't look at us, he says. I ask if there were other people waiting. He says 2 women were at the stop with him. I ask him to hold and try to reach the 2 women through transit complaint records. Neither picks up. By 1:15 a.m., the dot on my screen has completed the full Route 14 loop and disappeared from the tracker. I stayed past my shift the next morning and went into the system archive. I pulled every log entry associated with vehicle ID bus 44 and driver ID 0114. Driver ID 0114 belonged to a man named Garrett Hines, drove Route 14 for 9 years. The file showed his employment status as inactive. Reason: deceased. Cardiac event: December 14, 2021. 2 weeks before the route was officially discontinued. He never drove the discontinued route. The system had him logged as active. Not just that night. I went through the archive carefully. Bus 44 running Route 14. Driver ID 0114. Logged on 43 separate nights since January 2022. Always overnight. Always the complete loop. Total hours since the death certificate was filed: 847. I reported it to my supervisor. He had a T. Look at the system. They said old route data and driver IDs had been improperly archived, generating phantom GPS entries under certain conditions. They cleaned the archive. Garrett Hines' driver ID was flagged as suspended and removed from active rotation. 3 weeks later, at 11:50 p.m., a dot appeared on the tracker: Route 14. Vehicle ID bus 44, driver ID, unassigned. The system had removed Garrett Hines' ID from the record. It had kept the route, it had kept the bus, it had replaced the driver field with a blank, like it had cleared out the old occupant and left the position open. I flagged it, I logged it. I did not call anyone in Millhaven that night. There is no procedure in the operations manual for this. I have been looking for 3 months. There is nothing in any document I have access to that tells me what to do when the system makes room for something that should not be driving. The Well Road. I know how this sounds. I want to be clear that I am not the kind of person who talks about these things. I am a pharmacist. I have lived in Lagos for 12 years. And I approach most things the way you would expect a pharmacist to approach them, systematically with some skepticism. I'm telling this because it happened and I cannot revise it into something more comfortable. I was 15, 16 Benue State, visiting my family's compound during the school break. My mother had sent me to the market to collect some things, and I was walking back on the Well Road, a dirt road, maybe 4 kilometers, the one that runs past the old well the village used before the borehole was dug. I had walked it 100 times. Normal afternoon, hot. About halfway back past the old well, a woman appeared alongside me. Not catching up to me from behind, she was just there. I looked to my left and she was walking next to me at exactly my pace, and I had not heard her approach or heard any footsteps before she was there. She was maybe 40 years old, wrapped in dark blue cloth, nothing unusual about how she looked. She said, "The heat today," like we had been walking together for a while. I said something back. I don't remember what. We walked. She talked about the cassava harvest that year, how it had come in thin. She mentioned a family connection I half recognized. She was pleasant and calm, and nothing about what she said was unusual in any way. When we reached the compound gate, she stopped. She said, "Go inside quickly," and she touched my arm lightly. Her hand was cold. I noticed it because it was a hot afternoon. I went inside. I don't know exactly why I moved as fast as I did. Something in how she said it. My grandmother was standing at the door, and she grabbed my arm and pulled me the rest of the way in. and closed the door hard. I found out later that a fever had been moving through the outlying areas that week. 3 children from families nearby had died. I did not get sick. For many years, I told that story as a blessing, a protective figure, something that walked with you when you were vulnerable. My grandmother always nodded when I said that. She never added anything. A few years ago, I was visiting her. She was very old by then, and I asked her what did the woman look like from the window. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "She was not walking beside you." I waited. "She was behind you, very close behind you, the whole way from the old well." I have told myself since then that the story has the same ending either way, that whatever it was, it walked me home, that I'm here because of it, and I should be grateful. But I keep thinking about the words "very close," and about the way my grandmother pulled me inside, and about the fact that she never once in all the years I told that story ever told me to thank whoever it was. Room 14. I am a physical therapist. I have worked at a rehabilitation center outside Tampere for 6 years. The building is a converted manor house, pre-war construction, expanded in the 1960s, now a full care facility. Because of the conversion history, the room numbering is not sequential. On the second floor, there is a room 14 that sits between room 11 and room 17. No windows on the corridor side. On the facility blueprint, it is labeled as storage. I walked past it twice a day for 3 years before I thought about it. In February, I noticed light under the door. A thin line, yellow, steady. I tried the handle lock. I reported it to the facilities coordinator Heikkinen, who manages the building systems. He came upstairs with me, looked at the door, and said the room had no electrical fittings. The wiring was not connected during the 1960s expansion. He had the original conversion blueprints with him. Room 14. No light fixtures, no outlets, no running electricity. The light was on. He suggested light bleed from somewhere, a reflection from the corridor lamp hitting the gap at a certain angle. He checked the geometry of it. The angles do not work. The corridor lamp is recessed. The door sits flush. No other explanation was offered, and we moved on. I started keeping a personal note. Not an official report, just dates in a notebook I use for patient routine tracking. Over 5 months, 14 separate occasions, always in the afternoon. Always a Tuesday or a Thursday. Not every week, but never any other day. In June, I went to the senior administrator, Dr. Voutilainen, who runs the facility. She arranged for the room to be opened. It required a specific key from the facilities office, old brass key, heavy, on its own hook, unused since at least the 2018 renovation records. When Heikkinen turned it, the door swung inward easily. The room was empty. Bare plaster walls. One window bricked up during the conversion. No furniture, no light source. The ceiling fitting had been removed, the junction box capped. Heikkinen ran a torch around the room. Nothing. I was about to leave. Then I looked at the floor. Footprints in the dust. A small adult foot. Not a child, but small. They came from the center of the room in a straight line to the bricked window, and they stopped there. No return prints. No indication of turning around, pivoting, pushing off. The footprints walked to the bricked window and stopped at the wall as if the wall was not there. Heikkinen photographed them. The incident was filed as an unexplained interior disturbance, low priority. Dr. Voutilainen had the room relocked and said she would look into the access history. I continued walking past room 14 every day. 6 weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon, the light was back under the door. I noted it in my book. I did not report it. In August, one of my long-term patients began making anomalous progress. I use that word precisely. He is a man in his late 60s. I will call him Perty, recovering from a significant stroke. I had been documenting his motor recovery over 4 months at a rate consistent with his presenting condition. Then the recovery accelerated in a way I could not account for clinically, dramatically, measurably accelerated. No new medication, no change in protocol. Perty worked as a cartographer before he retired. He thinks in measurements. He is not a man who says imprecise things. One morning in September, he was walking the parallel bars, slow, steady, the way we do it, and without stopping, without looking at me, he said, "The one in room 14 says my legs remember how. They just need reminding." I stopped the session. I asked what he meant. He said someone visited him at night. He said a small person. He said very small. Not fully there. He said they walked with him in his room in the dark, up and down, slowly. He said they had been coming for 6 weeks. He said they were patient. I asked if he was frightened. He said no. They are helping. I did not put any of this in the clinical notes. I wrote it in my personal notebook and held it there. Perty was discharged in November, fully mobile. I filed the standard paperwork. Good outcome, all boxes completed correctly. No anomalies noted. Room 14 is still locked. The light has not appeared since October. I pass the door twice a day, and I do not look at it. Not because I expect to see the light, but because I have not decided yet what I would do if I did. Whether I would report it, whether I would leave it to whatever schedule it keeps. The footprints stopped at the bricked window. They did not come back. Perty's legs carried him out to his daughter's car on a Thursday morning, and I stood in the car park and watched him go. I was the only person in that building who knew both things. There was no form for it, and no one to tell. There still isn't. That's 7 tonight, and something I notice every time sitting with these stories after they're done is its own particular thing. The padlock that was always correct, the footprints pointing the wrong way, the bus running a route that no authority authorized. You can put each one down on its own and find a way to be comfortable with it. It's the accumulation that does something. The fact that every single narrator kept going, went back, stayed on the bus, filed the paperwork, walked the route, sleep. Well, I'll be here next week.